Runners will ask all the time if they should run in Hokas. And the answer can be challenging for running experts because there's a lot of different information and a lot of different factors that can determine if a runner is appropriate to run in Hokas. But shoes have such charged emotions behind them because people will be loyal to a certain brand, or runners will hear from their friends that they should be running a certain shoe because it prevents injury, makes them run faster, or it might just be that they saw that shoe, it looked really cool to them, and they wanted to run in it. So when we are advising patients about using specific shoes, it's really, really important to make sure we have the research behind us to be able to help guide them. Now, there's one key piece of research that helps us determine if patients should run in Hokas or not. And that fact is that we know max cushion shoes increase impact through the lower extremities while running. However, that doesn't mean all runners should avoid using Hokas. Let me break down what the pros and cons are and also some of the new research that can help guide us on being able to help runners determine if Hokas are appropriate for them. So let's talk about why Hokas, and I'm saying Hokas in general because a lot of Hokas have max cushion to them. So I will say Hokas equal max cushion, even though not all their shoes might be max cushion, that's what they're known for. So why do Hokas or max cushion shoes increase impact on runners? Well, while max cushion shoes might actually feel like there's less impact while running in them, what actually happens is that we show increases in ground reaction forces or impact through the lower extremities while running because we see that runners are landing with an increased amount of leg stiffness. And this was a research article that was done a couple years ago. We compared folks running in max cushion shoes to conventional shoes, and that research showed that those people with those max cushion shoes just land with their legs stiffer, which is going to equal more forces going through their lower extremities. So when you land with a certain shoe and that landing is going to be stiffer, and again, that's with those max cushion shoes, we end up having a situation where you're just running harder. Now we see those results of increased leg stiffness and impact through the lower extremities get even more pronounced with the faster runners run. So what does that mean for us? Well, it means that those folks using max cushion shoes, they're going to go run harder because they're perceiving that it's more cushiony, it's more plush, it's a softer landing. Think about it this way. If you go run and you're running with a very predominant heel strike, overstriding, and you're hitting pretty hard on the ground to start with, you put a max cushion shoe or a big pillow on the bottom of your feet, and all of a sudden you feel like you're running much softer. You can run harder, you can run faster, you can run kind of blowing through all of that big cushion at the bottom of your shoe. I'll use an example so you can understand this a little bit better, or maybe you already understand it and this is redundant, but I'll go over it just in case because personally I like examples that help me understand things. Think about barefoot runners and think about a barefoot runner running on grass versus running on concrete. You're going to run on grass, you can run with your heels down, you can run pretty hard. It's a softer surface, so you can just run a little bit harder with your heels and maybe a little overstriding as well. But on that concrete surface, all of a sudden, those runners are now running with maybe a midfoot or forefoot strike, or they're running much softer or with a much quicker cadence because the ground is just harder. The concrete is going to put more impact through their lower extremities, and all that impact is then going to make them say, oh, I need to run softer so I don't get hurt. That's similar with Hokas. Hokas or max cushion shoes are going to feel much softer. So you feel like you can run harder, and that feeling of running harder is going to make it so that there is more impact going through your body while running. Now, should all runners avoid Hokas? Not necessarily. You might be thinking to yourself, well, he's telling me that Hokas increase impact through the lower extremities. I'm just going to tell all my runners to not run in Hokas. No, not necessarily. Again, some runners might feel that Hokas are really helpful for them and that they feel very comfortable running in Hokas. So what runners should we be careful with prescribing Hokas, and what runners should we say, okay, yeah, I think it's appropriate for you to potentially get in Hokas? Well, for the runners that are running with a running gait analysis findings of having higher impact, we want to be very, very careful of getting them Hokas or putting them in Hokas. And again, I mean Hokas, and I am relating that to high cushion or max cushion shoes. So the running gait analysis findings that would amplify the impact going through the lower extremities would be several things. And these would be the things we'd want to be careful with runners presenting this way and getting them in Hokas. So we would want to be careful with those runners showing a very predominant heel strike at initial contact with excessive dorsiflexion. That promotes a lot of impact going through the lower extremities. Also, overstriding is a concern. Whenever runners land with their foot excessively in front of their hip while running, we concern that they're going to put more impact through their lower extremities. If the runner is running with a lot of vertical oscillation, so going up and down a lot, or an excessive stride length, we get concerned about. And even runners with a higher BMI is a concern for us as well. So all those runners we would advise to not get into Hokas. However, we think that there are some runners that are appropriate for Hokas. And again, you can see the first group of runners all had high impact running styles. We put them in Hokas, and that's going to create more pounding on the ground, more impact when they're running because of that big cushion on the bottom of their shoe. And so that gets amplified to having a higher risk to injury. Now let's talk about those runners that are going to have less impact through their lower extremities while they're running, and maybe Hokas are appropriate for these runners. So that would be your runners that are going to be landing with a mid or forefoot strike pattern at initial contact, have a higher cadence, so a quicker step rate. And while that isn't always related at different speeds, we can say that especially at slow speeds, higher cadence is something that would correlate to less impact through the lower extremities. If you want more information about that, check out a couple YouTube videos ago and the conversation we had about that. Also, the increase terminal hip extension at terminal stance would show us that this runner is more appropriate for Hokas. And you might be wondering why. In this case, we can see increased terminal hip extension is a lot of times correlated to less overstriding. So the less someone is landing with their foot in front of their body when they run, we're going to see a decrease in overall impact. So in this case, if they have increased terminal hip extension, we would say that runner is a better choice to be putting in Hokas. And then lastly, minimal vertical oscillations going up and down when they run. So all of those things can be factors to be able to help decide whether our runners are appropriate for Hokas or not. Now, again, this can really be something that's a hard decision to make. Some runners are going to feel like Hokas are the best shoe for them, the only shoe for them. And that's when we can present them the research, the latest information, help guide them, and then let them make the choices that they're going to make about their running footwear. Now, it's not to say every runner that runs midfoot or forefoot, or every runner that runs with excessive heel strike are candidates or not candidates for Hokas. These are good guidelines you can follow and good rules you can use to be able to help guide your runners to the right shoes, but it can be very, very hard to find the right shoes for runners for several reasons. Different runners all have running gait analysis findings, different presentations, different runners are going to have different preferences with shoes, and we haven't even started to talk about different foot shapes, arch sizes, the amount of energy return the shoe is giving you. There are so many different factors when it comes to shoes, and that's why the course, The Essentials of Running Gait Analysis, can help you to be able to understand what shoes are right for runners and good to put runners into to be able to be safe while they're running. Check out the course. If you have any questions, let me know. In the meantime, I hope this helps you guide your runners to be able to find the right shoe for them. If you have any questions, reach out. Until then, stay safe and talk to you soon.